You're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, where we discuss everything about the hit BBC series Doctor Who. And today we're discussing the Big Finish story, The Red House. I'm Dom Bettinelli, and joining me today on the panel are Jimmy Akin. Hey, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
And Father Cory Sticha. Hey, Father Cory.
How's it going?
Folks, remember to like The Secrets of Doctor Who on Facebook, where we're at facebook.com/Secrets of Doctor Who. Retweet us on Twitter, where we're at SQPN. And be sure to leave us comments wherever you find us. We love to hear from you. I want to remind you that, or let you know that we've got some feedback at the end of this episode. Stick around for that. And I want to tell you about another show on the StarQuest Network you're sure to enjoy called Pray Station Portable. It's an opportunity for daily prayer from the Catholic tradition.
Liturgy of the Hours.
That's right. So you can find that wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/PSP. So let's talk about Red House. Jimmy, can you give us a recap of what happens?
This week, the Sixth Doctor and Charli Pollard arrive on an Earth colony in the early 3000s. They are promptly chased by werewolves on wheels, and Charli is captured and taken before Dr. Peyton, who is known as Dr. Payne, in a big red house called the Red House. Dr. Payne believes that Charli is a skin hide, that is, a werewolf who has turned into a human. So she's looking to use a psychic lobotomizing machine to remove the human elements from her so that she'll be a normal werewolf. But Charli is a pure human, so this would kill her. The Valeyad, who has been disguised as a porter, freezes Dr. Payne in time and rescues Charli. He says that he's a Time Lord from the future, and he reveals the history of the colony. He says that humans, when they arrived, killed off the original wolf-like species on the planet, but first some were bitten and became werewolves. The werewolves were left on an island, and they gradually evolved into a new peaceful werewolf species. But they become aggressive if they turn into humans. Many humans who live on the mainland want to kill them, but Dr. Payne, who is herself a human, is actually trying to save them by removing their aggressive human elements. The Valeyad also says that Charli must help prevent the Doctor from leading a rebellion, as it will cause the mainlanders to nuke the island and commit genocide. Meanwhile, the Doctor has fallen in with a group of hippie werewolves who like turning into humanoids, and he's leading them in a rebellion in order to save Charli, which will lead to the genocide the Valeyad warned about. As the werewolves are taking over the Red House, the Doctor and Charli find each other, and Dr. Payne, who's now unfrozen in time, reveals that the mainlanders are indeed about to kill everyone on the island with a nuclear missile. The Doctor takes a group to the TARDIS in hopes of evacuating at least a breeding pair of werewolves to save the species. However, the nuclear missile goes off, but it's hundreds of miles away from the island when it explodes. The Doctor deduces from the key in the TARDIS lock that the Time Lord from the future borrowed the TARDIS. He used the time freeze technology to stop the missile in midair until the planet had turned so that it wouldn't hit the island. And he materialized the TARDIS around Dr. Payne's psychic lobotomizing machine, which is missing, and stole it. There's still danger, though, to the werewolves from the mainlanders, so the Doctor recommends that they leave the island and find a new island to live on. The end.
So let's start by just talking about what we thought of the story overall. Jimmy, what'd you think of the Red House?
I enjoyed it. It's not a knock me out of the park Big Finish production, of which there are some, like Live 34, I think is amazing. Or the Christmas episode we did with the Eighth Doctor and Charli. Some are just A+ level stories that are better than anything that's ever been done on TV. This was a good, enjoyable adventure, and I liked having Charli in it. The concept of a sort of lupiform human or lupomesoform human, someone that normally looks like a werewolf who then turns human, is an interesting concept. And I liked, in particular, the reference to werewolves on wheels. So at the beginning, the werewolf police are chasing Charli and the Doctor, and they're riding something apparently like motorcycles. And Werewolves on Wheels is a 1971 movie about a bunch of bikers who get turned into werewolves, and I've seen it.
That's great. How about you, Father Cory? What'd you think of this one?
Oh, I agree. This was a very enjoyable thing. I do like the flipping on its head the idea of werewolves. Instead of being human to wolves, they're wolves to humans, and that it was a gradual evolution. That they started out as a traditional werewolf, but eventually they became more wolf than human, and that was I thought kind of an interesting idea as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with both of you. This was a pretty good story. I mean, I don't think it was as good as End of the Line, the last one we talked about. There was something about that one I kind of liked a little more, but this one I enjoyed. I really like Charli. She's always fun in these stories now that we've seen her or heard her a few times with the Eighth Doctor, and I'm curious what the Valeyard's onto here with these stories. We've now seen him in two of these. He seems to be collecting technology, so that's kind of an interesting, open-ended question. I like the turnabout, the werewolves the wolves that become human, savage humans, as opposed to the humans that become savage wolves, and the little hint at the Little Red Riding Hood stuff that's going on here as well. Grandma's house and that sort of thing, which is kind of fun. So yeah, there's some nice fun elements in this. I'm not sure why I didn't think it was awesome. I'm not sure what was lacking. Maybe we can talk about that as we go through. But yeah, it was fun. It was functional.
Well, I think it's just a fairly straightforward story, which makes it a good story, provided it doesn't have any major flaws. And I didn't notice any major flaws, although I was a little annoyed by, there are some minor things I could mention, like they're a little inconsistent on just how wolfy are the werewolves and just how human do they become when they become human. So there's some little inconsistencies there. Also, they refer to the werewolves as wolverines, which I found a little distracting because wolverines are a real animal. Yeah. And they're not wolves. They apparently, I was going to say, maybe they don't have them in Britain. So I checked and they don't have them in Britain. Werewolves live in Arctic environs or much farther north in the Americas and in the Old World. But I don't know. I guess maybe wolverines, they don't have major sports ball teams named after them in Britain. And so they're less part of British culture, and it's not as distracting for British people, maybe, to hear werewolves called wolverines.
Maybe they were getting confused with Wolverine the X-Man as a man-wolf thing. Maybe, who knows? But yeah, that does seem that was a little distracting. So, as I mentioned, this is the second story in the Sixth Doctor's last adventure, the Big Finish series, and which features each one the Valeyard and the Sixth Doctor, but different companions each time.
Yeah, and this isn't too unusual for Big Finish. Normally, they don't switch up the companions like this, in like a 4-part set, but they do typically have a big bad, who's the Valeyard this time, that emerges slowly, just doing little things over the first 2 or at least 2.5 stories, and then they emerge from the shadows and become the big bad at the end.
Right.
But the reason for the changing companions is they're telling us this story is set across multiple periods in the Sixth Doctor's time.
Right, exactly. And we mentioned last time that Charli, when she's with the Eighth Doctor, she's not aware that she's this unstable factor in the time web. Whereas with the Sixth Doctor, she is aware, but he's not. And so we start off with her kind of stumbling a bit, maybe almost revealing too much. They're talking about adventures things that they've encountered recently, like, oh, no fictional highwaymen, no Marxist Daleks. And then she mentions vertosaurs instead of dinosaurs, which she's not supposed to know about vortisaurs.
Right. Because vortisaurs were something she met immediately after meeting the Eighth Doctor. In fact, they had a vortisaur on the TARDIS with them for a while as a kind of pet. And she mentions vortisaurs in front of the Sixth Doctor, and he doesn't know that she's a future companion. He just thinks she's a woman he picked up in the year 500,002. And so when she mentions vortisaurs, he's like, vortisaurs? And she immediately starts backpedaling with like, oh, whatever those might be.
Right. And vortisaurs are important because they're actually part of her being an unstable element in the time web there and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So does she get left in 500,002 by the Eighth Doctor?
I haven't heard those stories, but I assume she ends up there somehow.
Okay.
I mean, he may not leave her there, but she ends up there somehow.
Okay.
Could be a time tornado. Who knows?
Right. So this is the 31st century, which the Doctor spends a lot of time in, by the way, especially in Classic Who, I noticed. And this is the 31st century on some colony planet of Earth that was colonized a while ago. And we don't know much beyond that. The Doctor doesn't even know really where they are. And we get this curfew bell at dawn. They tell us it's dawn. The bell starts ringing and people start going in, which is, again, sort of the opposite of what you expect of, people coming out at dawn and having a curfew bell at night, perhaps.
There's a great line, and it's a little paradoxical, but there's a great line at the beginning of that, because it's still dark, but the sun is about to come up. And the Doctor, Charlie makes a remark about it being night or something, and the Doctor says, it's not night because the sun's about to come up. And Charlie says, have you been at the carrot juice again? Which is really funny, but it's also a bit of a paradox because it's Melanie Bush, who is the companion that forces the Doctor to drink carrot juice. And Melanie Bush is the Sixth Doctor's last companion. So this adventure with Charlie must occur before Melanie Bush, and therefore, why would the Doctor be at the carrot juice? Right.
And actually, that brings up a question I had. So, of these four parts of the last adventure, the fourth part is really the last adventure, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So that's the one that's going to have Mel in it and that sort of thing. Okay. And so back to this story. So the cops, the werewolves on bikes, they're all female, apparently, all female cops. They call themselves the Red Hoods, which is, again, that Little Red Riding Hood reference, which I think is kind of funny. And they chase the Doctor and Charlie into a forest, which is kind of funny because, again, in its fairy tales, you stay out of the forest. That's where you encounter the wolf. This is you're getting away from the wolves by running to this forest, which I think they even point out is like dark and foreboding or something like that.
Mm-hmm. And apparently sunlight is painful or distressing for the wolves, so they're wearing something called sunsuits, which I imagined as kind of like red hazmat suits to protect them from the sun.
Yes, with a snout.
Yeah.
And then Charlie, well, the Doctor gets caught up in branches, and there's a whole funny bit about the Doctor's talking about the Doctor's like jacket and being crazy, and Charlie taking the jacket from him, but she falls into a pit trap, and the Doctor has to run off without her because otherwise they'll both get captured, and she gets like you said, taken by the cops, but the Doctor encounters the hippie werewolves. And it's kind of interesting because with the werewolves, they don't try to make them, I mean, apart from the cops kind of yipping and baying as they chase the Doctor and Charlie, when they're having a conversation, they just kind of sound normal, like you and me. It's kind of interesting. And you kind of supplying, oh, right. Like I had to keep reminding myself, these look like wolves.
They do alter their voices a little bit to make it, sound more gruff and things like that.
Right. Yes, they do that sometimes. But I think they're trying to contrast that with when the skin hides become human. They don't just become like you and me, 20th century, 21st century Brits or Americans. They become savages, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Doctor at one point describes them in their human form, or he sees one of them transform, and he describes it as a kind of humanoid, a primitive humanoid. But it seems, and this is why I said they're a little inconsistent on just how wolfy do they get and just how human do they get, because they apparently can become fully human to appearance. In fact, they think that when they first meet him, that the doctor is one of them because he looks human, and so they recognize him as what they can become, and they think he's just another werewolf from the island, I guess. But he's daring to walk around in human form in full daylight. It's like hardcore, man. Wow, this is so bold. And the doctor has no idea what they're talking about because he hasn't realized yet what their nature is. And it becomes a big thing about, is he one of us or not? But there's also some funny material in here where the leader, a guy named Ugo of the hippie werewolves, is once the doctor gets brought to Ugo, they're planning to have a human transforming party in the daytime, and they do this in secret. And so Ugo is like, yeah, man, we're going to let it all hang out. And the doctor's, oh, it's that type of party. I think I better leave. And, hey, man, you're so funny. We're just going to do what comes natural. And so, and they keep going back to that well for, things that are meant innocently by the werewolves, but the doctor keeps taking them as sexual innuendo and becoming uncomfortable.
Right.
Well, and these are portrayed too as teenagers. They're hippies, but they're teenagers who are rebelling against the man, rebelling against the rules. Kind of think of Woodstock, but with werewolves.
Werewolf stock. Yeah, that's true. That's true. I mean, that does make it a little bit fun. That's seen especially where the doctor's very uncomfortable in this situation. And the other thing that's interesting is Dr. Payne or Paynton. They really drive home this idea right to the name that she's the bad guy right from the start. Mm-hmm. And it turns out they again, everything in this story is flipped on its head. And in this case, they flip it on its head. And no, she's trying to help people. She's come to help. Now, is taking the humanity out of them, the human DNA and the human psyche or whatever out of them and making them just plain wolf people, is that helping them really in the long run? I'm not sure, but I think she thinks so.
Well, she does, and she has justification for that. Whether anything is justifiable in the long run is always hard to say because we don't know the future. But she knows that most of the people who live on the mainland, most of the humans, are very suspicious of the werewolves and want to wipe them out. And they will do that if they perceive the werewolves as being aggressive. And the werewolves become aggressive when they take on their human form. It's like if you watch The Wolf Man from, what was it, 1941? Claude Rains, or not Claude Rains, but Lon Chaney Jr. As Larry Talbot. I mean, Claude Rains is in the movie, but he's Lon Chaney Jr.'s dad. Lon Chaney Jr. is a nice, sweet guy, mild-mannered in his human form, and he becomes savage as a wolf. Well, this is the reverse of that. The werewolves are peaceful when they're in their wolf form, and they become savage when they're humans. So they are a threat. She's effectively trying to cure Lon Chaney. Right. She's trying to extract the dangerous element. I mean, in fact, if you watch, I recently watched all the Lon Chaney werewolf films, which merge into the Frankenstein series. But his whole thing is, I want to be cured. Every movie he wants to be cured, and she's essentially trying to do that. She's trying to remove the dangerous homicidal element from him.
Right. There's an interesting parallel in this too, like a metaphor that they're going. I think they might be going for, because what we're told eventually is that the colonists were bitten by the native wolf-like creatures, on the planet, who caused them to start to transform. And over time, they became, they were exiled, isolated, and interbred. And over hundreds of years, became more wolf-like, but also more docile. And so, I feel like
wolves are kind of easy to domesticate. We've done it more than once. That's where we got dogs.
Exactly. And so it feels like there's a metaphor in here for colonization and interbreeding with local populations. And
the barbarity of humans, because they weren't going to let this native life form live. We killed all the wolves.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And there's there's real world history for that, where there were colonies, especially in the British Empire, but other empires as well, where the local populations were being bred out, or that there was an attempt to breed them out or to wipe them out,
including creatures, because these wolf creatures apparently were not originally intelligent, and I think they made a point along the lines of they weren't gonna. It's not like they were going to exterminate a people, but they weren't going to let this species live,
right?
And we've done that too, down in Australia and New Zealand, or Tasmania rather. It's like, hey, I think these thylacines are eating our chickens. Let's kill all of them.
Right, and wipe out the species.
Well, you don't even have to go that far away. Wolves in Montana are still a controversy to this day. There used to be a lot more wolves, especially in the mountainous areas of the state, and a lot of them were wiped out as people came in and set up their ranches and their farms, and had the issue of the wolves attacking their flocks, especially sheep. So, and it's still a controversy. They're reintroducing wolves into places like Yellowstone National Park, and there's what happens when the wolf leaves the park? Well, its days are numbered if it doesn't get back on the park.
Right. Wolves don't obey the park borders.
Nope.
Yeah, and according to this, I think the humans wiped out the original wolf-like species, and now all you have is the wolf-human hybrids that are left. So the doctor is with the rebels. Let's call them the rebels or the hippies, and that's when the Red Hoods come in. The cops show up. And the doctor apparently tries to hypnotize the police with his fob watch, or he makes it look like he's doing it, but they're like, you can't hypnotize us. No, that's not going to work. But instead, what he's really doing is redirecting sunlight off of his fob watch at them to make them start to transform, and that helps the skin hides escape, which is kind of a funny little thing he does.
I find the names skin hide interesting because skin and hide are the same thing. Mm-hmm. What they mean it as is, your hide becomes like skin, but in actuality, skin and hide are the same thing.
Yeah, instead of fur hide,
or like fur skins. Like if we had werewolves, we would call them fur skins or something. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So it's kind of neat. The fob watch, she said, is basically a mirror on the back because it was Beau Brummels, who notorious, infamous
king of the dandies.
Yeah, and very vain. So he could use the back of the watch for a mirror. Well, then it worked to reflect the light.
And it's kind of appropriate. I don't know if they meant it this way. They may have, but it's kind of a comment on the Sixth Doctor because he's sort of the ultimate bad taste dandy. He's got the amazing Technicolor vomit dream coat, and which I recognize it's extreme, but it never bothered me really. But he does have a bizarre sense of fashion, and I can see Beau Brummel, looking at him and saying, "Oh wow, I love that look," and ending up giving him his mirror pocket watch.
We recently heard Beau Brummel. Oh, Beau Brummel was in the Twin Dilemma. That's right. He was mentioned. I was trying to remember where we'd heard Beau Brummel in relationship to the Sixth Doctor before. I thought it was a Big Finish, but I just looked it up quickly, and it was in the Twin Dilemma. So
for me, the only way I know Beau Brummel is from Billy Joel's "It's Still Rock and Roll to Me."
Exactly.
Really be a Beau Brummel, baby.
So the Valeyard shows up again, and he's once again posing as a random Time Lord, and he's trying to convince Charlie to stop the doctors from helping the rebels overthrow the cops and whatnot. What's his motivation here? Is he really trying to help them from being wiped out, or is it just I want them to be delayed long enough for me to get a hold of this psychic tool?
Oh, well, I think it's a mix. The Valeyard is going to be villainous at the end, but like the Master, not everything he does is bad. He can do good stuff for even good reasons. He is planning to steal the psychic lobotomizer, and we'll see what role that may play in the future. But he is planning to steal it, and he genuinely, but that doesn't mean that he wants all these werewolves to be killed. He does take the effort to use the TARDIS and his time freeze technology to stop the missile from killing all of them. He didn't have to do that. He could have just left with the psychic lobotomizer and let everyone die, but he doesn't want to do that. He also is genuinely protective of his former self and of Charli because he knows she's connected to the web of time. And what Dr. Payne is about to do to Charli will kill her unintentionally. So that's why he intervenes now to save Charli, because he knows she's important. His past self is important. He can't play with his timeline too much except under controlled conditions, which aren't present here.
Right. And even though the Valeyad is a future incarnation of the Doctor, so even though the Valeyad may be a bad guy, he's still the Doctor at some level, and so he's not all bad, that sort of thing. Yeah, I do like it when he's talking to Charli. He does say, if the Doctor succeeds, he may be subject to criminal proceedings, which I think is a nice, funny reference to the trial of a Time Lord.
Yeah.
And then he says that Charli has to be the one to do it because he can't, he's forbidden, and she's not subject to the rules of the web of time. So he shows that he knows about her situation.
Yeah, I found that discussion confusing. I'm not sure that holds together, but he does have at least a plausible form of deniability if the Time Lords ever call him on the carpet, because she's already a rogue element from the laws of time.
And so we have 3 of the young werewolves that are the main ones in the story. There's the female Lena, and then Ugo, the leader, and then this other guy, Arin. Arin. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Ugo kind of, at first he seems like this easygoing hippie dude, but when he changes, he wants to kill all of the constables to destroy the Red House. It turns out he's not Mr. Easygoing.
No, not in his human form. And he wants to go to the mainland and infect all of the regular humans.
Yep. Right. Turns out he's kind of like this radical revolutionary as opposed to Mr. Laid back, get along. And then, but what it turns out, so I forget what happens to him. Does he get killed?
I don't know if he gets killed. He certainly comes close to it, but he kills Constable Daisy. I love that Constable Daisy, by the way, because she's just introduced as the Constable, and she's really mean. Yeah. And then when she has Charli in custody, she's interrogating Charli and asking Charli questions about herself, and Charli answers the questions and then asks pleasantly asks questions right back. Name: Charli Pollard. What's yours? Daisy. Oh, and then she's let her name slip. And then later you have a report where Ugo and the rebels have killed the constable, and Charli says, "Not Daisy."
Right. Well, she's made this connection. Yeah.
Well, and she actually comes across, after the interview, more grandmotherly, where she was being hard for the interview, but she really was a very gentle person.
Right.
Wolf.
Right. And again, it's this more of this reversal of expectations that the story is doing. Like everything's kind of reversed from what you expect it to be.
That's part of what I like about this story is even though it's not super high concept, they have put thought into it that goes beyond just this is a basic monster story.
Right. And when the Doctor finally shows up at the Red House, Dr. Payne's lab, they discover that the psychic probe is missing, and the Doctor's first instinct is to think that the Celestial Intelligence Agency has stolen it, and because it has to be a Time Lord, someone who can freeze time or something along those lines. Charli never lets on
and has a TARDIS that can materialize around this room-filling machine.
Right, exactly. And Charli never lets on, that she encountered the Valeyad, who she thought was just another Time Lord.
Not at first. She does eventually admit, there's something I may have neglected to mention. There was this Time Lord from the future here.
Right. And so now they think that the missile is coming, and the Doctor's instinct is, I need to save everyone, which is the usual Doctor instinct. And so the first idea is to evacuate everybody into the TARDIS, because the TARDIS obviously can hold everybody. but nobody wants to leave their house in the middle of the day because of, the whole turning into a human thing. And in fact, he eventually realizes he can only save a breeding pair, quote unquote, of Aaron and Lena.
Yeah, that's kind of like not true because time machine, dude. You've got all the time you need to get these people off the island if you want to be creative about it, but they kind of gloss over that possibility. I like how they play the Aaron and Lena breeding pair idea because, Dr. Payne proposes this. And you can at least, give the species a chance to be saved if you save a breeding pair. And Aaron is not one of the regular hippies. He's like only recently joined the group in order to investigate what happened to his brother who had joined the group. So he's not a committed hippie werewolf revolutionary at all. And he's thus not Lena's boyfriend.
Right.
And Dr. Payne is like, okay, we have to save you and this girl who's not your girlfriend so you can be a breeding pair. And he's like, wait, what? But he accommodates himself pretty rapidly to that idea.
Yeah.
And it's like, I have to think, if I was in that situation, yeah, I'd probably accommodate pretty rapidly too.
Teenage boy. So here's this cute girl. You're going to have to repopulate the species. Well, okay, I suppose.
I have to, yeah.
I'm not sure how the girl feels about it, but the teenage boy with the pretty girl.
Well, she kind of tells him to hush up too, so I think she was kind of thinking about the idea as well.
Yeah,
right.
It's kind of like, oh well, that makes everything so much easier. Okay.
So but they don't end up having to do that because, like you said, Jimmy, the missile fell short, and we get the reveal that. This clever thing, the time freezing, which is what we talked about recently with Missy freezing all of the airplanes in the sky. But in that story, the witch is familiar.
The witch is familiar. Yeah, in that story, the airplanes are orbitally locked to the surface. So as the planet turns, the planes do too, and this is different.
Yeah.
The missile was frozen in a way that was not orbitally locked to the Earth, so the Earth the planet continued to turn underneath it.
Right. I suppose you can adjust things like that if you're a Time Lord.
So it could also have been an ICBM, so it got out of the atmosphere.
Right. That's true. That's it's ballistic. Yep, and just out. So they survive, and they come up with this idea to. In fact, I think what the doctor said, not even just find a new island, but go and integrate into society as best you can. Try to fit in, wasn't it?
Well, that's what TARDIS Wiki says, something like that. But that's not what I heard. I heard go find another island somewhere, and it might even be a paradise.
Okay. I was telling Father Cory earlier that I've taken to editing the TARDIS Wiki pages for these things when they get stuff wrong. Like last time, it was Danny and Dave and stuff like that. So, that may need to be another edit that it needs to make. But the doctor never finds out that the Valeyard is involved. So that's two stories, and the doctor never finds out. Presumably, he won't find out in the next one. He won't find out till the fourth one.
He may find out by the end of the third one. That we may have that's another common pattern in these sets of four is we may have the big bad revealed at the end of part 3.
Okay. Yeah. Which is that happened a lot even in classic TV, the getting the big reveal, and that's the cliffhanger to part 4.
Yeah.
So that's true. But that's where we end up. Final thoughts? Any, Father Cory?
Nothing here.
Jimmy?
I like how there are elements, especially towards the beginning of this, of folk horror, which is like it's a kind of British horror that sort of has a rural setting. It's not like in a city like an American Werewolf in London or whatever. It's like a murder. There's this creepy murder village somewhere. And we very much have that kind of folk horror vibe at the beginning of this because you're on this remote island, and so it's rural, and you have the cottages, of which are some kind of pop-up pre-manufactured things, but you have what are effectively villager cottages that are around this big house on the hill, which is the Red House. And Charlie says it looks like they're kind of like servants' quarters. You know, they're where the people who serve the big house live. And then you have this looming, imposing house with this terrifying name, the Red House, and it's red. And you have Dr. Payne. And I mean, her real name is Dr. Payton, but the locals perceive her as causing them pain, so they call her Dr. Payne. And then you have chasing through the woods. That commonly happens in folk horror. Monsters in the woods, and these are classic monsters being werewolves. You have the curfew bell at dawn, which is when then everyone cowers inside their houses during the day. And this is all weird behavior that seems sinister, and it's very folk horror-esque.
Right. By the way, I did like that opening bit where the doctor, Charlie imagines that they're servants' quarters for the manor house. Mm-hmm. And so the doctor starts teasing her about being aristocracy, and
you're showing your background, and she's like, she's like, no, I'm serious. I think that's what this is.
And he's like, I'm sorry, I'm not addressing you properly, my lady. That was good. That was funny. She also described herself as an Edwardian adventuress, even though that's technically not correct. She's more of a Georgian adventuress. But people would associate that with Jane Austen instead of, early 20th century. I just thought that was kind of a fun little note, because for American listeners who don't know, the Edwardian, Georgian, that sort of stuff, Victorian, refers to who the monarch is.
Yeah.
And so, Edwardian is usually refers to the beginning of the 20th century, even though Edward was succeeded by George. We wouldn't call it the Elizabethan era in the 20th century. That's Shakespeare's time.
That one's taken.
Yes. Yeah. Right. And that's the thing, is it's only taken by the first one who gets there. So you have to come up with another one. So, or the more prominent,
or how, depending on how long it's been.
Right. That's true. Yeah. So, that brings us to the end of, this particular part of this Big Finish story, the Red House. Before we wrap things up, I do want to do some feedback from listeners on our episode 315 on Last Christmas. We had talked in that one about people dying in their dreams, and so Paul Leone commented on our YouTube. He said, I've died in at least one dream, and I'm still here, I think. So
not dead yet.
Not dead yet. I'm feeling better.
Before we recorded, Dom, was commenting and said, I think therefore I am, or I think therefore I'm alive. And I said, actually, no, you can think when you're dead. In fact, in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, there are, which I read a few months ago, there are helpful, what you do with the Tibetan Book of the Dead is you read it to a dying person or a dead person to help them navigate the afterlife. And in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, it says things like, now you're going to notice your corpse is there, and you're going to notice your relatives are, washing it and preparing it and mourning you and things like that. And you will think to yourself, oh no, I am dead. Whatever shall I do? And then it gives you advice about what to do and not do while you're dead. Like, don't try to get back in your body. It will not end well. Your body's going to decay. But I love that. Oh, that sudden realization after you're dead is, oh no, I'm dead. What am I going to do? And that's actually reported in literature elsewhere, that not everybody who dies is ready to face the fact they're dead. You can have a kind of sixth sense situation where someone who's dead doesn't want to acknowledge that fact.
It's kind of funny. The Tibetan Book of the Dead is kind of like what to expect when you're expecting, but for death.
Yeah.
What to expect when you're dead. That's funny. All right. Well, thank you, Paul, for your feedback. We love to get feedback. We'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Doctor Who, including Michael H., Mark F., Chuck C., Chris B., and Sandra S. Their generous tax-deductible donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Doctor Who and all the shows at Stark West. And you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. We'd also like to thank Victor Lambs, who edited this episode. And that's it from us this time. We'd love to know what you think of this Big Finish story, The Red House. You can let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com or the Secrets of Doctor Who Facebook page. Send an email to drwho@sqpn.com or visit the StarQuest Discord community at sqpn.com/discord. You can also comment after you watched us on the Secrets of Doctor Who on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/StarQuestMedia. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the third part of the Sixth Doctor's last adventure called Stage Fright. Until then, Father Cory Sticha, thank you for joining me and sharing the Secrets of Doctor Who.
Thank you, Dom.
Jimmy Akin, thank you as well.
Well, Dom, thank you.
And
apologies to headphone listeners.
We'll bring that down and edit. But once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Doctor Who on StarQuest. And remember, and now this really fits, stop yipping. It's like being stuck in the lavatories at a debutante's ball.